about you and to learn more about you. So, just like the mutant plants from outer space in the musical Little Shop of Horrors, Audrey 2, starts off as a little sapling that needs drops of blood to grow and then ends up eating whole human beings. Facebook and Google and these companies need your data to grow. Your data is Facebook's food. That is what it feeds on. That is what it needs to grow. And this business model is not just Facebook's business model. It's Google's business model. It's Twitter's business model. It's the business model of nearly every venture capital-funded Silicon Valley startup or multinational, transnational corporation. Right? It is the dominant business model in technology today. And if so, we need to call it something. We need a name where we can discuss it. And I suggest we use one that we already have. In the old days, when I began working with computers, we had floppy disks. And your applications came on floppy disks. And if you installed a floppy disk in an application, and it did something more than you thought it was going to do, maybe something that's not in your interests, we used to call it spyware, right? But this was spyware 1.0. It was like the panopticon. It was very cloak and dagger, right? Very easy to identify as malware. We moved on from spyware 1.0. Today what we have is spyware 2.0. And spyware 2.0 is beautiful. It's cute. Privacy dinosaurs on Facebook. It's all colors of the rainbow. It's cute little Google Doodles. You've all seen Google Doodles, right? How can Google be evil? It's just little cute doodles. You gotta love it, right? But it doesn't change the fact that it is still malware. It's harder to recognize. It doesn't change its nature. So let's find out how this thing works. The anatomy of spyware 2.0. How do they get our data? It starts with services, right? Remember, Google started out as a single service. It was just a search engine. Back then, they didn't even spy on you. They stumbled onto that business model after 9/11. But today, Google is a completely different piece. It has a plethora of services, right? Do you want a place to put all of your photographs? Put them on Picasa. Will Google run facial recognition to understand who you are in the picture, who your friends are? Will they run sentiment analysis to see how you're looking at your friend and therefore try to understand what your relationship is with your friend? Of course they will. Why? That's just their business. That's how they make money, right? Do you want a place to put all of your files? Put them on Google Drive. All of your documents, etc. Will Google look through all of these and try to understand you better? Of course. That's how they make money. Do you want to communicate with your friends? Use something like Gmail. Like, who uses Gmail here? Very, very popular email application, right? Nearly all of you do. But not you, sir, because you're like, I don't use Gmail. All right. Let's think about Gmail. Now, you might say, well, okay, I understand. I understand Google is providing a free service, and it's not really free. There's an exchange, and I'm exchanging some of my privacy, some of my own information for a service that I'm getting, right? And it's my personal decision. It's a selfish decision. So, don't tell me what to do, Aral. And I would say you're mistaken. Think about Gmail. You email people from Gmail, right? And you can make a decision about whether you want Google to read those. But the way email works, people also email you. So the decision you've actually made is that it's okay for Google to read the emails of everyone who emails you as well. And if you have a custom domain, like with Google Apps, then they may not even know that Google is reading their email. You've made that decision for them. So it doesn't just affect you. It is much more like secondhand smoke. It also affects the people around you. It also affects the society around you as well. And there are very interesting parallels between the tactics used by companies like Google and Facebook in lobbying and big tobacco as well. So how else do they get your data? There are games. How many of you have filled out a CAPTCHA on a form? a reCAPTCHA at the bottom of a form. You're filling out a form, and then you have this like stupid little CAPTCHA that you have to fill out. It protects the form, right? But there's also a little bit of it, like maybe a street sign or another word that they can't read. And what you're doing there is you're teaching Google, for example, in this example, you're teaching Google how to read a street sign that they photographed with Google Street View. They're very upfront about it. They're very honest about it, right? They say, help us and we'll help you. It's a little game, right? There are actual games. Who's played Ingress? It's a free game on Android. Now, here's what happens. There's been an alien invasion. And you have to walk from landmark to landmark. And you need to hack into these landmarks. And you need to find the fastest way to get from these landmarks as you're playing this game, right? So you're playing this free game. At the same time, what you're doing is you're providing Google with very hard to come by data on pedestrian walking patterns. They don't even have the resources to send all of their employees into town to find the fastest way to get from one landmark to another. So what they're saying is, you guys go. Here's a free game. Go play the game. Isn't it a great game? It's all alien invasion, guys. Come on, go. And you, like the lab rats, are running out and finding this information and giving it back to Google. So you might say, okay, Aral, you've scared us a little bit about the services, but they're easy to not use. I might argue with that, given that all of these companies have the same business model. Do we really have a choice to stop using Google? Maybe. We start using Yahoo. What's its business model? The same. We stop using that, and suddenly the decision becomes, do we take part in modern life, or do we stop doing that? And I don't think that's an acceptable decision. But let's say, as Google wants you to believe, that you can just stop using their services. All right, and Google's lost. Google can't lose, right? So what's the next step? Well, what if we gave you devices? What if we gave you beautiful, gorgeous devices, like these Nexus phones? Aren't they beautiful? Google really gets design now. They didn't always, but now they do. They create beautiful experiences. And you know what else? I don't know if you guys heard about this. This is like half the price of an iPhone, right? Like, isn't that an amazing bargain? I wonder how they do it. Because when you think about it, Apple is the largest company in the world by market capitalization. Tim Cook is a supply chain guy. He knows how to, purchase things at a price that makes him happy. Is he asleep at the wheel? Does he not know what he's doing? Did they somehow get to the position they're at by accident? How can Google undercut Apple by half in price? Well, they can if these are beautiful data collection devices that they subsidize, because what they really need is your data. Why? Because if I can make your sign-in, your login to your device, your Google username and password, it doesn't matter what service or application you use, I will still get valuable data from you, right? You sign into your Android phone, it doesn't matter whose services you use, you are logged in to Google, and I'm getting information, right? But, again, you might say, well, you won't use that. We'll buy an iPhone or a Firefox OS phone. I'm really sorry if you do. Or some other phone, right? Maybe I'll get the new Ubuntu phone. Maybe that's going to be the great thing. And they've lost. But they can't lose. So, what's the next step? If you need data to grow, what is your end game? Connectivity. Exactly. So what if I made your login to the internet your Google username and password? Now it doesn't matter what device you use. You can use an iPhone, but you're signing into the internet with your username and password, and I get valuable information, right? With Google Fiber, for example, sign in with your Google account. Now that's for us in the West. But how many of you have heard of the next 5 billion? Anyone? Very excited about the next 5 billion in Silicon Valley, right? Sometimes it's the next 6 billion, I don't know, the number goes up. What about them? Do you know who these people are? So these people are the poor people in countries that many people in Silicon Valley have not been to, right? Who they've heard cannot get on the internet, right? So what are we going to do? We're going to bring them the internet, right? How are we going to do it? We're going to do it with balloons, right? Google Loon is the name of the project, to bring internet to the next 5 billion, 6 billion people by sending balloons to their part of the world from us with love, right? Or satellites, or drones, right? Does this remind you of something? Because we did this in the past, right? Does this remind you a little bit of the white man bringing the fire to the natives? Yeah? Because it does to me. This is just a new form of colonialism, right? There are people within these communities who can create their own solutions and are. Are we supporting those? No. We're saying the white man will bring you the fire. Terms and conditions attached, right? Tiny print. What is this if not digital imperialism? Google today is trying to build its own mobile network. So again, connectivity, the next step of that. So that's data about us. That's very, very valuable, right? But that's not the only data in the world. There's also data about the world. And Google needs that as well. So how do you gather it? You gather it with satellites, right? You gather it by buying or collecting cartographic data from countries. Sometimes you sell it back to them at a profit. That's a good business. And you have cars that drive around. Who's seen the Street View car? Anyone done anything funny, like a pull the face? It's fun, isn't it? Google Street View. Hi, take a picture of me, Google Street View. But there's some places that they can't go with a car. And that's why they have the Google Street View trike. Because they need the data, right? But what if you can't go there with a trike? There's the Google Street View snowmobile. What if you can't get there with a snowmobile, but you really desperately need the data? Well then, there is the Google Street View trolley for going indoors and getting photos. And if you can't go there with a trolley, that's okay, because there's the Google Street View backpack, right? And I saw this recently. I shit you not. This is real. Yep, that's a camera, if you can't see it. Do you get the feeling that they really need the data? Yeah? But, even if they showed up with a backpack, or a camel, there are two places that you would probably not let them into, right? One is your workplace, and the other is your home. I say probably because I've actually seen, I think it was a German television program, they did a spoof, they dressed up like Google Street View, and they went to people's homes, and they said, Street View, we're here to take photos of your house and put it on, and some people let them in. There's this woman in the kitchen going, so is this going to be all on the internet? And Google Street View guy's like, yeah. She's like, oh, okay. But, let's say that the people in this room would not let them in. So if you won't let them in to your house, who do they need? There's a pattern developing here. I don't know if you can see it. They need you, right? You won't let them in, so they need you. Have you heard of Project Tango? Google's latest phone project. Project Tango is a phone with a 3D depth sensing camera that you buy from Google, and then you take it into your home, right? And if you're walking around your home, it starts mapping out the inside of your home in 3 dimensions, and of course sending it to Google. It also has object recognition. So it knows that you have an Xbox there, and it knows what the magazine is that's on your table, and it knows that maybe you like this or you like that, based on that. So because you will not let Google Street View into your house, they use you, again, as a lab rat. You'll let yourself in, right? We just need to let you carry it. And all of this is for your data. But data is not even the most valuable bit. Data are just the atoms. It's when we start combining, people are getting scared. It's when you start combining all of these pieces of data together that you get something far more valuable. We call it a profile, right? It's a digital you. It's a simulation of you. And this is really, really valuable. This simulation that I have of you is really valuable. And here's why. Because I can't take you, and I can't lock you in a room somewhere, and I can't run experiments on you 24 hours a day, right? Because we have laws against that. That's called kidnapping. Our corporeal selves are already pretty well protected in some Western countries against intrusion, right? We have laws for this. But what if I can take everything about you that makes you who you are, apart from your body? I don't want your body, right? But if I can take everything else that makes you, you, now I can put that in my lab, and I can study that 24/7 to see how it reacts to whatever I do, right? Because there are no laws really protecting that. This is one of the main things that we need to change. This is why it's so valuable. We used to have a very valuable business in the past. I don't know if you guys heard about it. We used to sell people's bodies. It was called slavery. Then we decided that maybe that's not a good thing to do. And now, in polite conversation, nobody really talks about it positively. So, what do we call taking everything else about a person that makes them who they are and selling that? I think that's a question that we all have to ask ourselves, because that is the business model, the main business model of the industry that we're all in. And what happens if you take that? If you take everything that I know about you in real time, you take everything that I know about the world in real time, and you combine it, what do you get? This is what I call the camera panopticon. We laugh at old stories of when people dropped a camera to some natives, and some of them were scared that it would steal their souls, right? And we look at that and it's just a camera. What if it was a camera that went much deeper and did it continuously? I think it starts becoming less funny, those stories that we used to hear. And what happens if you own one of these? Maybe you start thinking that you know what truth is. Google recently said, we're looking at moving away from page rank, which is what they use, the popularity of a page, that's what they use with their own algorithm, to show you pages that are more popular, that more people think is important, higher than others. That's their main algorithm, page rank, right? They said we're moving away from that. We're looking at moving away from it to using truth as the rank. Which begs the question, truth according to whom? And of course the answer is, in this case, truth according to Google. So if I created a website and it said in an H1, Google is malware, I have a feeling that this would not rank very highly with their new algorithm. Because as far as Google is concerned, this is probably not true. So you might say, okay, these companies, maybe they're doing horrible things, but remember that thing we said at the beginning, the government has the right to incarcerate you and maybe take your life away from you as well? At least they're not sharing this information with the government, right? Well, of course not. As we know, after 9/11, in the United States, they formed this organization, the Information Awareness Office, with the publicly stated goal of attaining total information awareness, to know everything about everything. And this was their actual logo. Now, if you're going to set up in the future a government agency with this sort of a mandate, don't make this your official logo. People get scared. So people got scared. And they said, you know what, we were kidding. We're not going to do any of that. We'll shut it down. And of course, many years later, with the Snowden revelations, we found out that the NSA really needs to hire a PowerPoint designer. But apart from that, we found out that all of these companies that we trusted with our data were sharing that data with the government, that they had not shut it down. Why? Because it's convenient and it's cheap. The data that you voluntarily give to a third party is not under the same protections under the law. And it's all in one place. So when the government wants it, it's like a drive-through McDonald's. They'll drive up and say, hey, give me all this information, and don't worry, it's not under the same protections as if we would have had to gather it ourselves. What do they have to do if they have to gather it? They have to like drive one of those vans in front of your house, right? They need to surveil you directly. They need to get a warrant from a judge. All expensive and inconvenient. Why do that when you can have a drive-through, right? As Bruce Schneier said, the NSA didn't wake up and say, let's just spy on everybody. They looked up and said, wow, corporations are spying on everybody. Let's get ourselves a copy of this, right? So if this is the case, I'm sure that people who run these corporations really care about this, right? They're probably really worried about this. So let's hear from Eric Schmidt, who is the current executive chairman, ex-CEO of Google. He said, there's been surveillance for years. I'm not going to pass judgment on that. It's the nature of our society. Okay, Eric, then what should we do?
If you have something that you don't want anyone to know, maybe you shouldn't be doing it in the first place. Maybe you shouldn't be doing it in the first place.
Did you all hear that? If you have something you don't want anyone to know, maybe you shouldn't be doing it in the first place. I mean, Eric solved the privacy problem, right? We can all go home now. And of course, this is absolute nonsense. Because privacy is not about whether you have something to hide or not. It's about having control over what you choose to share and what you keep to yourself. It is so important that we have seen it fit to make it an article in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, in Article 12. Because think about what happens when the default is public. If the default is public, anything you want to keep to yourself has an association of guilt attached to it. That is the world of 1984. And remember that when people like Mark Zuckerberg say privacy is dead, they are not talking about their own privacy. They're just talking about yours. Mark Zuckerberg, when he was having work done on his house for 2 years, signed non-disclosure agreements, NDAs, with everyone working on his house, so they couldn't even tell anyone that that was his house. If you walk into Google today with a camera, or if you walk into the NSA or to GCHQ and you start taking photographs, you will get arrested. Because when they say privacy is dead, they're not talking about their privacy. If everyone's privacy was dead, we'd still be okay, right? If we knew everything about corporations, and we knew everything about governments, and they knew everything about us, at least it would be an equal playing field. Right now, the entities that have no right to privacy, governments and corporations have no right to privacy. People do. But they're the ones who have privacy, and we're the ones whose privacy is being taken away. This is the real problem in the privacy issue. But remember that when you hear that companies like Microsoft and Google are leading a coalition demanding limits on government surveillance, they're saying, government's bad, yeah, they shouldn't be spying on you, right? When they form things like reform government surveillance, right, and say, hey, the government has to stop spying on you. There's a word for this. It's a technical term that we use in the industry. It's called bullshit. It's absolute, unadulterated bullshit. It is misdirection. It's a very old trick in magic. Don't look at what this hand is doing, look at what this hand is doing, right? So we can continue doing the actual things here. Why is it bullshit? Because privacy is fundamentally incompatible with their business model. All companies like Google, Facebook, etc. can compete on is the illusion of privacy. And they spend a lot of money creating that story, that illusion. If you want an example of how they think about this, this is what Michael Novak, a product manager at Facebook, said. Now we're thinking about privacy as a set of experiences that help people feel comfortable. Comfortable with what? With the fact that you don't actually have any privacy on these platforms. So this business model that these companies have of free, giving you something for free, is an absolute lie. But it's more than a lie. It's a con. It requires a con to perpetuate itself. And we have to understand where this con begins. It begins with the startup. A startup is not just any new company. Startup is a Silicon Valley brand. It's a very specific type of company that acts a specific way. It's a temporary company, and it acts a very specific way. So let's look at Mark Zuckerberg's startup when he was just a startup, right? He needed money. So where did he go? Well, with a startup, you go to a venture capitalist. This is actually a photograph. They all look like that. You go to a venture capitalist, right? And you say, at the very beginning, you have nothing yet. You say, hey, I'm going to build a platform. I'm building a platform. And in a few years' time, in 4 years maybe, we'll have 100 million people, 200 million people on it. How much money will you give me today for those 200 million people in 4 years' time? That's what you're selling at the very beginning. And the venture capitalist maybe says, hey, I'll give you 5 million, right? Why? Because they know that if it's successful, they will make 10 times that back, right? Or more in 4 years or 5 years. Now, more than likely, it will be unsuccessful. And that's why the venture capitalist has also invested in 9 other businesses and has taken a huge risk. And that's why they need one of those to be a billion-dollar company, because that's how they're going to make their money. It's kind of like gambling. So they say, yes, let's do it. Excellent, right? This is the sale. The sale doesn't happen at the end. The sale happens at the very beginning. It just takes a few years to mature and then close, right? What's already been sold are the future users. Now here's a problem. Now Mark has to convince the future users that he hasn't sold them, that he won't sell them, that all he wants to do is to create a beautiful platform where they can share things with their friends, right? And he's very convincing. So they say, oh yeah, let's do it. And that's the con. Knowing that you've sold, and yet having to con the people to build the value, to build your platform so that you can complete the sale. Think about it. This happened with Twitter as well, right? When Twitter first started, the first 100 people, 1,000 people, 10,000 people, they weren't getting as much value from Twitter as they were putting into Twitter. They were helping build Twitter. I was one of the first ones there. And then what did the Web 2.0 people like Tim O'Reilly say? Hey, if you use Twitter's open API and you build Twitter clients for them, you will be helping the open web. Bullshit, right? We did, I believed it. I built a Twitter client until we got Twitter to a point where there was a tipping point, right? Where the value you got back from the network was more than what you put in. And that's where you lose control. The only point where you can kill a startup is at the beginning. Once the network effects happen, once you lose control, you can't do anything. There's nothing we can do about Facebook or Google right now, apart from possibly regulation. We can't in any way affect it. We have no control anymore. So that's the con. Several years pass. If it's successful, it's successful. If it's not, that's fine. Startups are temporary companies. They either fail or they succeed quickly. And the venture capitalist comes back, and there's an IPO, an initial public offering, a sale to the public, or a sale to another company with the same business model like Google or Facebook. And that's it. The sale has completed, right? It began at the very beginning. So startups, we're crazy about startups in the world, right? Startups are great. They're great for the economy. They're the long tail of malware. Why do you think Google invested $100 million in startups in London? Because the ones that succeed are the ones they're going to eat so that they can grow. That's how it works. This is a monopoly. Google, you might argue, is a monopoly as well. That's what the EU is looking into right now. But this business model itself is definitely a monopoly. And it has ramifications for our future. Because some of these startups are coming up with very cool things that are really beneficial. So, Spritz, I was with their CEO at a conference at dinner, and he showed me Spritz, and it was awesome. Look at it. It's a new way of reading. If you're looking at the words, and if you can read them, you're reading at 250 words per minute. That's awesome. It's probably the first new way of reading since reading, right? And he told me at dinner, we found that people with dyslexia, they can read better with this. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. It helps people with dyslexia as well. It's really nice. And then naively, as I always am, I asked, well, what's your business model? It's a great question. How do you make money? And he looked at me like I was an idiot. And he said, we know what you're reading. right? And how do they work? They have a software development kit, SDK, free, that anyone can take, use their technology, right? And build applications. And at the conference, he said, we really want you to build email apps. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense, doesn't it? But these things have ramifications. We're getting into healthcare, right? Everyone's excited about healthcare in Silicon Valley. Over 90% of 80,000 health-related web pages exposed user information to third parties. What kind of user information? One company, Medbase 200, reportedly used proprietary models to generate and sell marketing lists of rape victims, domestic abuse victims, and patients with hundreds of different illnesses. If that makes you feel ill, join the club. The problem is that most mainstream technology today is malware. Now, that's hard to hear. We don't want to hear this because we don't want to think that an industry that we're involved in is doing this. But you know what? I'm really sorry. We have to start understanding it if we're going to make a difference. That's today. That's not tomorrow. That's now. What about tomorrow? What are the things we're excited about for tomorrow? How about the Internet of Things? Who's excited about the Internet of Things? Come on, I know you are. Everyone's like really scared to put up a hand now. There is no Internet of Things. The Internet of Things is just a continuation of Web 2.0. There is only the Internet of data. What we did initially is it was very easy. When we started with Google and Facebook, we had arteries of data to tap into. We tapped into those arteries. We're still sucking from those arteries. That's good. That's low-hanging fruit. We used Web 2.0 to get other people to build applications that would then funnel data to us. But now, the low-hanging fruit is gone. We need to find the capillaries of data. And the capillaries of data are in your homes, they're on your persons, and they're inside you. So Nest, Internet of Things. Who's heard of Nest? Yeah, it's a thermostat, smart surveilled thermostat. Knows when you're home, knows when you're not home. Google thought, this is really beautiful. Yeah, let's buy them. So last year in January, they bought them for $3.2 billion. And then Nest said, we know that you might be afraid, but don't be afraid because our customer data won't be shared with the rest of Google. Wow, isn't that great? So they must have paid $3.2 billion just because they liked how shiny and round and beautiful it was, right? And then on June 20th, now stay with me here, it gets a bit complicated. Google Nest bought StropCam, a camera that you put into your home that watches your home. But Google didn't buy it. No, that'd be silly. Google Nest bought it. And the head of Nest said, like Nest customer data, StropCam will come under Nest's privacy policy, which explains that data won't be shared with anyone, including Google. Right? That was on June 20th of 2014. This was 4 days later on June 24th. Nest to share user information with Google for the first time. They might as well have ended that headline with "dumb fuck." Why? Because what are we doing? Just like a frog will jump out of boiling water if you throw it in there and escape, we are in a pot of slowly simmering water. And it's gotten warm, you know? And we're enjoying it. And we're like, yeah, this is really comfortable, man. I could stay in here for ages. Not aware that the fire continues to burn underneath. So the Internet of Things, unless we as individuals have ownership and control, is the Internet of Things that spy on you in your own home. What kind of things? I know that Innovations is sponsored by Samsung, so let's take a local example. How about a Samsung Smart TV? So Samsung recently said, yeah, you know, if you put one of our smart TVs in your living room, it's listening to everything you say and sending it to us, and we can do whatever the fuck we want with it. If you don't like it, turn off your TV. Okay, cool. What about a little doll? How about a Barbie doll that listens to everything that your kid tells it and then sends that so that it can be analyzed for all sorts of purposes. So that's the Internet of Things right now. But we have also cool stuff that you can wear, right? Wearables, the quantified self, right? Same thing. Unless we have ownership and control, then the quantified self is simply the surveilled self. But we're not stopping here. We're going further because we need the data, right? Where are we going? We are going inside you. So I met this company when I was giving a talk at Nesta in the UK called Proteus. They're a Silicon Valley venture capital funded company who had come to lament about how hard it is to get into the NHS. And they said things like, oh, you in the UK, you're so far behind. You should just let us come in. Just let the white man in, right? We're all white here, it's fine. Let us in, and we'll make it better for you. You should do things our way. And they say that a lot, right? They probably say that about Greece. They say, oh, you don't know much about technology. Let us show you how to do it. Let us build you, let us help you make startups. So this company, they make a pill, electronic pill that you swallow, and it sends out data about your internal chemistry, right? Why? The stated reason, which is not always the actual reason, the stated reason is because they want to help you take your medications properly. That's a very big problem. Lots of people don't take their medications according to how they should. But, of course, after their presentation, I put up my hand and I asked my little magic question. I said, what's your business model? And, of course, remember that they thought they were in a very friendly environment as well. Not that I'm not friendly, but... and he said, we don't know, which means data, but we have a very good idea that it's about the data. And I was like, thank you. So their business model is to sell data from inside you. Now you might say, Aral, you with your American accent, I'm not American, but still, coming to Greece in Europe and telling us these things, don't you understand? Europe is different. It couldn't possibly happen here, right? We love this in the UK. That's where I live. I hear it all the time, right? When the Snowden revelations came out initially, everyone in the UK was like, what, those crazy, zany Americans, what are they like? You know? No, it couldn't possibly happen here. And then we found out that the NSA actually uses the GCHQ to do things that it cannot do because of their constitution, because in the UK, we're a constitutional monarchy without a constitution. Whatever that means, I don't know. But yeah, remember digital imperialism? It is happening here. This is what it looks like. I saw this site the other day, eustartups.com. Look at the symbols that they're using. Yeah, eustartups.com wants you. Why is it happening here? For a very simple reason. The same reason as all of the others, right? Business. We love that. Yeah? Neelie Kroes, who was cheerleading for startups in the European Commission, has now left that position and has started cheerleading for startups in the Netherlands. The person who's taken over that position thinks that net neutrality is a Taliban-like issue. This is the person who is creating the digital single market in the European Commission. He thinks net neutrality, the people who support net neutrality, are like the Taliban. This is the European Commission, people. So recently, I was on a television program called Inside Story on Al Jazeera, talking to, among others in a panel, this lady, Janice Richardson. She runs two initiatives, European Union initiatives, InSafe and European SchoolNet. So the mandate of these is to protect children online, right? To protect children's digital rights. And this is what she said in the program. I'm just going to play it for you, and then we'll talk about it.
If we were to use Facebook at school or any other social network at school as a learning tool, young people would really learn how to use them in a much better way, a much more meaningful way, and wouldn't waste so much time on them. So I think that there are very valuable tools online.
Right, I can see Aral is shaking his head in disagreement. Let me give him a chance to work. We're getting short on time here. Sammy, I'm going to have to disagree with Janice on that. I think putting Facebook in schools is the worst thing we can do. Again, Facebook's business is to spy on you and to analyze your behavior and to psychoanalyze
like saying McDonald's should be sponsoring nutrition classes.
It's like saying McDonald's should be sponsoring nutrition classes. Someone told me afterwards, Aral, I hate to break it to you, in some schools, McDonald's sponsors nutrition classes. The problem is not with my naivety, let me just say that. So, why? Why would someone who is tasked with protecting children say that Facebook, an unsafe space with this business model, should be brought into schools and served to children as a good thing? Why should she say that? To understand it, you have to also understand that those two European Union-funded initiatives, InSafe and European SchoolNet, their only mandate is not to protect children. There's also another mandate, to carry out corporate development, to create corporate partnerships. With whom? With Google, with Facebook, etc. That's why she says what she says. We call this, in Europe, public-private partnerships. We call it multi-stakeholderism. We call it co-regulation, inviting companies like Google to make the rules that govern companies like Google, right? There is actually just one word for all of this, and it's a word that I first heard from Lawrence Lessig, a constitutional lawyer in the United States. It's called institutional corruption. And we're seeing the effects of this, and they might actually be multiplying. Who's heard of TTIP? Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. Yeah? What TTIP is a trade agreement that's being negotiated in secret by various governments in the world, in the European Union, right? And it includes a clause called the Investor-State Dispute Settlement Clause. This, if passed, will give companies the right to sue governments when they take decisions that protect their people that are not in the interests of the companies. This is already passed in Canada. Canada has already paid hundreds of millions of dollars to corporations for laws that it passed to protect its citizens. As the former Australian Trade Minister said, ISDS can be used by corporations to challenge the sovereign right of governments to protect the environment, health, culture, safety, and working wages and conditions. So what we're really seeing here, we started with technology, but technology is really a symptom. It's a way to understand what's happening, right? What we're really seeing is a war on the public sphere, our shared commons. It's a war on human rights and individual freedoms. This is a war on the individual by corporations. This is a war on democracy itself. In fact, today, I think we probably should come to accept that we no longer live in a democracy. We live in something that looks a lot more like a corporatocracy. When TTIP passes, if it does, I hope it doesn't, we will be even closer yet. Technology is not the problem in and of itself. As Melvin Cransford says, technology is neither good nor bad, and this is important, nor is it neutral. Technology is not the problem. The core problem, I'm a designer, right? The thing I do, my goal when I'm designing is to find the right problem. Most times, we solve the wrong problem. Sometimes we solve the wrong problems really well. That's not what design is about. Design is about understanding the actual problem and then solving it. The core problem we're talking about here isn't technology. It's systemic inequality. All technology is a multiplier. It multiplies whatever you feed it. You feed it bullshit, you will get orders of magnitude bullshit back. You feed it meaning, it will multiply meaning into application. Technology amplifies the status quo. Just throwing more technology at the problem is not going to fix the problem. It's going to help amplify the status quo, unless we change the nature of technology, of the technologies that we're building. So systemic inequality is the core of the problem. And as I see it, it is our species' existential threat in the Anthropocene, in the era of the human. And this is what it looks like. According to an Oxfam study, The bottom half of the world's population owns the same as the richest 85 people in the world. Let me just put that to you differently. 85 people in the world, less than there are in this room, have as much wealth as 3.5 billion of the world's poorest combined, as half of the world's population. In another study in 2016, for the first time, the 1% of the world's population will have more wealth than 99% of the world's population combined. This is systemic inequality. That is the problem. So if we left it here, which I'm not going to do, you would probably hate me. You'd be like, Aral, you've depressed the shit out of us. Thank you. Thanks for coming to Greece and doing that. We already had issues. Now we have more. We're not going to leave it here. Let's talk a little bit about the solution. What is a solution? I recently read this. I put this into my presentation about 2 days ago because I think this guy gets it. Andrew King said, the answer is stronger regulation on new monopolies like Google and Amazon. The answer is new labor laws. Rather than the internet, the answer is government. Now this is very interesting. I don't agree that the answer is government as it currently is, but government as it could be if we actually put people in there who know what the fuck they're doing, right? Which is up to us, because it's not going to magically happen. There are people in this group who probably know what they're doing. That could be in government. What we need to do is we need to remove this. Unless we remove corporate interest in public policy making, unless we remove corporate money in public policy making and public policy decisions, unless we can do this, nothing else matters, right? I'm creating a technological alternative, as you heard, and even if it's amazing, without this, it will be illegal in 5 years' time. We need to remove corporate interest from public policy making. Technology can be part of the solution, but if it's going to be, we have to reevaluate how we approach design. Design is very important, and unfortunately, nobody really gets it. We think design is pretty colors and whatever your corner radius is, and sometimes we ask people after we've done all the hard work to come in and prettify it and do a little bit of pixel pushing, right? That's total bullshit. Design is what actually alters the status quo. But design without ethics, which is what we're mostly doing, is simply manipulation, right? So we need to implement an ethical, holistic approach to design. Our current model looks like this. This is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and my friend Aaron Walters, he took it and he mapped it to design. He said, we should build things that are functional, reliable, usable, but then also go beyond it and build something pleasurable, which is great. But even if we do all of this, all we will get is decoration. Decoration perpetuates the status quo. Decoration makes the status quo prettier. Decoration makes it more palatable. Design is what alters it. So we need to alter our mental model. Let's start with a pyramid. But at the very bottom, let's start with the things that really matter. Let's start with the elements that respect human rights. Let's start by respecting human rights in what we're building. And then let's move beyond that. Let's create things that are usable, yes, and respect human effort. And then let's move beyond that and create beautiful experiences, excellent, wonderful things that make people smile, that are delightful, because experiences matter, but not at the cost of their longer-term freedoms, right? This is what I call the 3 R's of ethical design. And the bit that we're always getting wrong is that core. We are building things that do not respect human rights. And if you do that, you're not building products for people. You're building products on the backs of people. You're building products that use and sell people. And that's what we need to change. To change that, we need to break the venture capital cycle that I talked to you about. We need to stop thinking that these people are the heroes, because they're not. The last thing we need are Silicon Valleys in every one of our European countries. We actually have to start saying no when they start coming in and saying, let's build it here as well. Right? And it's hard to say no because they come with a lot of money. But remember, the white man always comes with the fire. and there are terms and conditions attached. So let's get rid of that. And mostly, we have to stop tolerating bullshit. There are two things that could happen in the Anthropocene. We continue to tolerate bullshit, and we build our societies on foundations of bullshit, and then we keep getting surprised when we get bullshit fruit from the bullshit seed of the bullshit tree. Or we can actually plant different trees. In terms of technology, the way that I want to do this is with independent technology. We have a manifesto. Read it. It's not hard. This is what Facebook tells you. They say to share your photo with your friend, you must first share it with us, and then we'll give it to your friend. There's no technical reason why that has to be the case. This is what we're saying. You want to share your photo with your friend? Share the freaking photo with your friend. You don't even want to know about it. We'll connect you two together, but that's it. This is just one tiny example. There's no technical infeasibility. We do this, then we start people out in their own homes, a safe place, not the home of a stranger, right? Where we don't need any creepy strangers in the middle. Where people have ownership and control of themselves to start with, and then they can decide what they want to do with it. We do this, then we can build a future in which we have individual freedoms and a healthy commons. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. They're requirements for one another. We do this, and we build a future in which we enjoy fundamental freedoms and democracy. And that is the future that I want to build. That is the future I want to live in selfishly. That is the future that I hope that some of you in this room will help me build. This is the future that humanity needs if we're going to fulfill our potential. Thank you. I'm sorry, I know I'm a little over time, so we won't be able to take questions, but there's a panel.